City Park's a treasure. I think we all know that. It's over 100 years old. It's had a storied history. Some of these photographs speak to that. It was used as a campground for a while. It used to have a large diving platform in the middle of Sheldon Lake, and it also had a horse racing track. All of those things occurred in City Park over the last 100 years. And you will see throughout our presentation, we have several historic photos embedded, so I hope you enjoy those. But what's important about recognizing the history is the story of how the park has evolved. And tonight is just another chapter in that evolution. It's about meeting the needs of users. It's about thinking about tomorrow and what the uses for that park should be to not only meet the needs of this generation, but the next. So I'd like you to be thinking about that as we walk through the presentation tonight. We're calling this a park refresh, and it's kind of a new thing for us. We have many new parks that we construct, and we have a lot of parks that are in need of updating. Several of our parks are 20, 30 years old. This one's 100. So it's time for us to consider how we might refresh or update parks, and this is kind of the first one that we're taking on. The reason that we're doing that is it's been recognized as a council priority, something the council has directed us to do. Particularly also related to the timing of it is the City Park train and the desire to construct a new train in the park, and we'll talk more about that later. We do have some funding available for a phase 1 project. We'll talk about phasing towards the end. So a portion of the project is funded, but not all of it. And again, we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. And finally, I want you to know that nothing that you're going to see tonight is set in stone. We are genuinely here to listen, to receive your feedback, and we fully expect to refine the plan based on the feedback that we receive. This is City Park. The yellow dash line kind of gives you a picture of its context, how it fits within the neighborhood. And we've got Grandview Cemetery to the west, City Park 9 to the west. See West Mulberry is kind of the south boundary, Jackson the east, West Oak the north. The thick yellow line is the specific boundary for the park, and then that, which is about 85 acres in size, and then the green is what we're calling the core area. The core area is about 15 acres in size. That's the area that we are looking to improve upon, and all of the things that we'll be talking about tonight are in that green area. How many of you were here back in 2016 when we had goals and talked about goals for the project? There's a few hands. Great. Quite a few hands. Excellent. So these are the same goals that we talked about in 2016. We haven't changed them at all. Our goal is to meet these goals, right? That's what we're trying to accomplish. So bear with me. Those of you who have heard these before, I'm just going to quickly review them. The first is respect the history and character of City Park. Andrew Jackson Downing was the designer of the park, and he had one specific goal in mind for the design, and that it would include large clusters of trees and open meadows. And you can see that in the park today, where we have open meadows on the hills. We have clusters of trees that kind of envelop those meadows. So that's kind of the most defining historic character piece that we have in the park today. There's also many other historical elements. The stone walls that are there, the Statue of Liberty, the cannon, all of those are historic elements. And our plans do not move or modify or change those elements in any way. They will stay in place as they are now. Second goal is improve pedestrian safety near City Park Pool. Those of you who visit the pool know that this can be an issue. There's people that walk in the street, kids are going back and forth, matter of time before somebody gets hurt, so it's something we want to address. Improve sense of place, just an opportunity to make City Park a destination more so than it already is. The thinking there is that parks over time will become a collection of things, and they tend to lose their identity, so it's just a chance to kind of regain some of that. Incorporate the new train. I mentioned this earlier. This is a primary goal of ours because this was a voter-approved initiative and there's funding for it. So it's kind of at the top of the list in terms of the things that we want to get done in the first phase. Improved playground. This playground's been around a long time. I know many people, multiple generations have played on this playground, and it's time for an update, bring it up to current standards. There's issues with the sand and the surfacing and things like that, so opportunity to improve upon it. Improve the restroom. It's also old and in need of improvement. The Club Tico, a real popular destination, but kind of a little bit of an odd entry to that building. So we'd like to explore ways to improve upon it, make it more obvious that it is an entry, add some landscaping, lighting, things like that. Safe, convenient parking. This photograph is taken along Bryan Avenue, and you can see how the cars are just kind of finding a place amongst the trees. We'd like to formalize the parking, make it safer, provide sidewalks, etc. Enhance pedestrian connections and bikes. This is a common occurrence in City Park, but bikes chained to benches, right? So that's something we want to improve upon. Additional and or enhanced shelters. A lot of the shelters are showing signs of age. So those are the 10 goals that we prepared. Kind of our next piece then was to prepare some initial concepts. And again, this was back in 2016. These are the concepts that we presented, and the intent was just to get a read from citizens about their preferences, the thoughts on what we're putting together. So I'm going to quickly just go through these. If you're interested in looking at these in more detail, they're available on our website. The first concept we called Trolley Garden. The primary purpose of or goal of the Trolley Garden concept was really just to celebrate the trolley, bring it further into the park, build a structure for it, surround it with gardens, make it more central to the city park experience. The second concept we called Lakeshore. Lakeshore, again, was kind of about bringing back some of the historic nature of the park. If you look through the historical documents, it speaks a lot to how the lake was the centerpiece of activity, and there were things that happened after hours, and it was sort of part of the city park experience is coming to the lake. So this was about improvements to the Lakeshore. Park Center was about a hub, creating a hub where all park elements were intercepted. And then Existing Improve, this was about minor improvements to the park, so make improvement upon the playground and improvement upon the train. So these were 4 big ideas that we put out, and we got some great feedback. We had a number of events. We hosted 2 meetings, community meetings. We also held numerous events at the park itself on food truck rally nights. There were other events that happened over the summer. We had an online survey, and we got a lot of good feedback there. We also did social media pushes and got feedback that way. So got some excellent feedback. This is kind of the results of what we heard, and certainly this isn't all of the results, but these were the feedback summary based on those concepts. There was a kind of 45% said, hey, we like the Trolley Garden concept. 28% liked Existing Improved, 20% Lakeshore, and few liked Park Center. So this, together with the written comments, gave us some good guidelines and some direction of how we could proceed with a preferred or refined concept. And there's the photo of them out on the lake. This is maybe my favorite one. I like that one. So anyway, that's what we'd like to walk you through tonight is the refined concept. Start with an overview. This is a picture, again, of the core area of the park. You can see Sheldon Lake there in the foreground, and that core area just north of the park. These are the different parts to the concept. Begins here with the City Park train. The train the new train has a larger footprint than the old one, and that's due to turning radii that are required now. The old train had very tight turning radii, and that's part of the reason why it derailed a lot and didn't work real well. And so we don't want to do that again. So this proposal is to put the train here in this area. This is where the playground is today, and this meets all of those turning radii criteria. Here you can see we have a pavilion. The pavilion concept is about bringing in the trolley and the train, housing them in one place. Jen will talk about that more. New playground and restroom. One of the things we hear is that, wow, the playground's hot, and it's because it's in sand and it's in the sun. And so this concept is about kind of nesting the playground within the trees and in the shade, and taking the shelters that are there now and pulling those out in order for that playground to fit in that location. You can see the promenade. The promenade here is closing this section of City Park Drive, turning it into a pedestrian way. And here you can also see some shelters that are located here. The gardens, trolley gardens, the boardwalk, that's just about improving the lakeshore edge, making it more comfortable, easier to access, providing ADA access, all those sorts of things. And then the improved area. We don't really have, we've got a few ideas for the improved area, but we want your feedback on that this evening, of some ideas that could happen there. And then tennis and pickleball. One of the things that we discovered as we tried to fit the train in is that tennis and pickleball courts would need to be moved. And that's just based on, again, the turning radiuses that are required for the train. So our proposal is to put the tennis and pickleball courts over in this location, right over here, and with some added parking. So those are kind of the big pieces. I'm going to have Jen come up and walk you through some of the details.
So I'm going to start talking about the trolley garden area specifically. In this first image, what we like to do is collect inspiring pictures that are kind of lead the vision as we go into the design process. So these images are showing that we really feel that the trolley gardens could be a naturalistic Colorado-style garden where we have xeric and pollinator-friendly plants that would include perennials, ornamental grasses, and flowering shrubs. That there would be lots of walking paths within the gardens with a variety of seating areas where you could sit in the shade of the existing canopy trees or underneath a pergola within the garden. There could be also some really beautiful sculptural pieces that help give a sense of place, but also create some structure and character year-round in the gardens. And the next image shows how those gardens could really be laid out within the park itself. And the idea here is that there would be a very strong sense of entry into the gardens on both the south and the north sides, where there would be some sculptural elements and pergolas that you enter into that space through. That these gardens really become kind of a backbone for the core area where they tie together the pavilion, the trolley, the train, the promenade, the boardwalk, and the lakeshore. So they're kind of a fabric that really helps unify that whole space. One of the other things that the gardens really do is provide an enriched experience for the train ride. So as you come around, the train tracks, you don't want to see the entire loop around, or you're going to get bored because you're going to see where your destination is before you've even left. So having, shrub beds that really mask off views and where you pass underneath the canopies of the trees could be fantastic. The cannon stays and is inside the loop here, so you could ride right past that World War II cannon and in the memorial gardens surrounding it. So we see the gardens as really helping define a great character and experience for that train ride itself. It also provides a great place while you're waiting for the trolley to take a stroll or sit while you're waiting. The trolley has about a 30-minute time from the time it leaves the park till it comes back. And so if you're waiting, it's another place close by to where the trolley comes in where you can enjoy nature. So we see this as a destination for people who want a passive recreation experience within the park and feel like these gardens could really improve the sense of place by using appropriate xeric plants that provide habitat for pollinators, which we need, and reduce water consumption in the park, and really by also helping really set off and define the edges of the expansive lawns that are so valued and appreciated in the park. The next area that I wanted to talk about was the pavilion itself, and again, here are some character images. And some of the things that are important in creating the pavilion structure is that we want it to be stately, a stately depot or train depot. We want it to be beautiful and something that can be cherished in the park. We also want it to sit lightly on the land, so we look at how piers could be used or decking could be used around it so that we sit lightly and protect the tree roots in the area. We want the form to be inspired by the majestic trees we have in the park. It is the city's arboretum, and we have champion trees, we have notable trees. There's lots of trees that have been donated over the years, and so we see this as also a way to really celebrate and honor the trees in the park as well. I think also kind of drawing from the trees, the warm, rich wood materials and colors and textures can be included in the design. This view shows what the pavilion could look like from Oak Street, so the north side of it. So one of the ideas is that the pavilion would not only display and house both the train and the trolley, but they would be there year-round. So they're in secure spaces, so when the park closes, they can be locked up at night, but people can still see through them and admire them and appreciate them and visit them when they're not in operation. This next view is a view from the southeast side, and looking in and how there's also a pretty adequate gathering space that could possibly be reserved for special events in the park. And just to orient you again, the train, is in this section in here, and the trolley is up in this section here. There's a raised deck, so you can actually go up above and actually look out across the gardens, or you can look across as the train ride goes out and comes back in to the pavilion from this location. The lighting is something that we're considering as well, how we can use lighting to really illuminate the beautiful arching timber forms that are in this structure. I'm going to talk about the playground area next. So the playground is located where the existing big groups of picnic shelters are today. And they have this beautiful backdrop of towering trees, which really sets the stage for a really unique treehouse playground, where there would be platforms within these towers with rope bridges that connect them, that really offer rewarding views for kids when they get up inside of them. In addition to the 3 large towers, there's a zip line where kids can ride and get the experience of kind of flying through the forest. There are some of the canopies obscure it, but there's areas where there are swings. There's also lots of different spinner and motion devices kind of around the sides of these towers. And then tucked in here next to the new restroom is a smaller tot lot for kids 5 and under. And here's another view of those tower structures, kind of showing how they're made from wood, but that you can see through them, that it's not like your kids will be totally obscured once they're in there. The intent is that you can actually see them. There's some cutaways that show how there's 3 or 4 stories of platforms inside of these that vary from 10 to 20 feet in height for the kids. So there's lots of levels of imaginative play once you get inside of these. And then here's a view, just an eye-level view from inside that kind of shows that there's a planned circuit of play within this playground. So there's lots of high challenges. Kids have log jams and rope climbs, and there's various ways to get in and out of these towers, and then there's tube slides that come down, back down to the ground level in them. One of the towers is anticipated to be accessible, and it's located on the ground level. And you can see the poured-in-place rubber walks that connect the accessible units within the park. And then this is the smaller children's area, and they're going to have challenging play too. It's just scaled back quite a bit in height. So they also have log jams and rope bridges and lots of imaginative play opportunities. They have their own version of a treehouse that's kind of a Lost Boys shelter where there's spaces up above that are accessible through a rubbered hillside berm and spaces on the ground level as well. The promenade is the next area that I'm going to talk about. And the promenade really could be a friendly pedestrian way that has seating opportunities at key locations along its length, and really be flanked by soft planting beds and having lighting that provides a safe environment, and keeping views open would be the goals of the promenade. And then this shows from the renderings the east-west connection of the promenade. There's a black and white drawing here that shows a little bit more detail. But the idea is that there are nodes on the ends where there's a big drop-off on the west close to the pool, where a couple of buses can stack as well as cars. And there's some seating and entry features here. And then on the east side, it would intersect Sheldon and sort of that angling northeast connection of City Park Drive. So traffic coming south and north, the one-way directions would still be maintained, and then exit would be out on City Park to the northeast. But we would raise this whole intersection there and have it be a specialty pavement to really signify that that's a pedestrian crossing zone and cars have to stop and yield. We also see, significant spaces at key locations where there would be bump outs in this promenade for seating, where the gardens definitely intersect that. We see it being kind of a place where people could congregate. And so at strategic places, there would be seating opportunities. There are also some group shelters that flank the promenade, and they're a little bit wider on the side and have additional overhangs with bench seating. So if you want to people watch, it's a great place to hang out on a summer afternoon, watching people, strolling and passing up and down this promenade. The promenade would also serve as bicycle access east-west through the park as well. And again, we see that both sides of the promenade being softened with plantings. As that road is closed, the City Park Drive, the idea is that the pavement will be pulled away from the historic walls, and there will be some low, beautiful planting materials in front of those to really set them off and showcase the walls and not have paving right up against them. And these are some images that help depict some character for the boardwalk area, which is along the lake shore. And so one of the things, and I don't have the quote, I know Carol Tunner's here, she may actually remember, but in some of the historical documents, there's references in history to how there used to be beautiful ambient lighting along the lake shore, and people would stroll, once upon a time. And there is some lighting there today, but I think we've even heard on Monday from folks that there's lots of pockets of darkness as you pass around the lake. And so we'd really like to look at how you could have low levels of lights that would meet dark skies, but create a uniform lighting condition during operating hours so that it is a safe place and there's good visibility, and it would really create a really nice atmosphere. And here's a vision shown in the rendering. The idea on this is that there's a couple of different zones. There's a shade zone that runs where the existing paved path is today, and it connects to the loop around the lake. So you could still bypass the boardwalk if you're trying to get in your miles or your steps. There's seating opportunities in the shade along that walk. And then as you come down in steps or in ramps on the ends, there's an accessible way now to get to the lakefront that doesn't exist really today, where there's a broad sun space where you can really sit and enjoy the warmth of the Colorado sunshine. You can watch the ducks and enjoy the views across the lake. We see this being a space that really could get used a lot. We're thinking there would be lots of different seating opportunities where there could be some built-in bench seating between the steps. There could be some Chase lounge chairs in a few sections, and then there's a raised bollard edge that kind of creates a safety barrier for really small children, but you could also climb up there, and it'd be a great place to fish or hang out or just really appreciate the views in the park. Moving into the phasing and the costs next. Kurt was talking about the platform as one of his favorite pictures. I love to camp, and I just think it's the coolest thing that people could camp at City Park at once upon a time. There were cottages you could rent. People also just had rows of car camping. You'd pull up your little car and camp right there in the park, so that's pretty cool. So this image doesn't show very well on the screen, but there's a copy of this map on the back table. If you haven't gotten a chance to see it, I invite you to take a look because it does show all the proposed features in the park pretty clearly on the plan that's on the tables. I won't spend a lot of time because it's not very legible up here, but we'll show you in a diagrammatic fashion what's on those maps. So this is kind of the existing conditions before we show you the phasing diagrams. Obviously, you can see the lake. This is Oak. This is City Park Drive here, so this is our core area. Phase 1 would include removal of the pickleball and tennis courts, modifications to both the playgrounds. The small tot lot, it's a very, very minimal modification. The other one, there's actually quite a bit of sand, but it extends in here, and so there would be one swing set that would have to come out in order to make room for the train tracks that happen here. So phase 1 includes the design and the fabrication of the new City Park train, which includes a locomotive, a gondola car, which holds passengers, and a caboose car, which also holds passengers, and the tracks as well. So the design of all of those components and getting the site ready and installing the train tracks, the budget's anticipated to be about $1.8 million. It is fully funded, and the construction for that project is anticipated in 2019. Phase 2 would include the pavilion and the trolley tracks. So currently the trolley tracks kind of parallel Sheldon as it comes in, and so the rerouting of those tracks so the trolley could come into the pavilion would be part of that project, as well as providing a switch and a spur so that when car 25 is finished, 2 trolleys could actually operate simultaneously. There would be a way to do that so you could get more ridership for that ride. And then the playground and restroom are located here, and there's also one picnic shelter that would be proposed to be right immediately adjacent to the playground, as well as some seating along the edge. There's a group of picnic shelters that would be in phase 2 here that would be in kind of an open lawn space and with some really nice shade trees off to the west. And then the reconstruction of the tennis pickleball courts with some off-street parking and the detention that's kind of required for those additional services on that side of the park. The estimated costs for those improvements is between 5.7 and 6.7 million. And then phase 3 would include the remainder of the elements, which includes the trolley gardens, the closure of the street and creation of the promenade and the drop-off, the boardwalk, which would be the new boardwalk on the north, and then replacement of the existing boardwalk so that the boardwalks have the same character and feel and there's contiguity along that lakeshore. Improvements to the area where the existing City Park train tracks are today. And we'll talk a little bit more about some ideas and get your thoughts on those later. And then street improvements. So the white areas along here show that, especially on South Bryant, the parking that's being used on the gravel shoulders will be formalized and striped, as well as there be places on the other streets where additional pockets of parking would be added to counterbalance the removal of those spaces on the portion that gets closed for the promenade. And those costs are estimated to be between $3.4 and $3.5 million. So as we said, phase 1 is fully funded. $350,000 has come from the Community Capital Improvements Program. Another $1.4 million has come from Building on Basics. And those were both voter-approved initiatives. So that totals about $1.8 million. Phase 2 funds are included in the current funding requests for the city's BFO cycle, so for the 2019-2020 calendar year, and then phase 3 funds would be requested in the next cycle thereafter, so that's for the year 2021-22. So if you want additional information on the phase 2 specifically and what all of the detailed costs are and how that's broken out, we invite you to visit the city's website. If you go to the city manager's link, there's a culture and recreation offers, and City Park Refresh phase 2 is actually offer number 32.6. There's quite a few. Read them all if you want. If you don't, you might have to scroll through until you find it, but it's towards the end. So there's quite a bit of information there. We also want to make sure that you take time to fill out the comment card while you're here. And if you're somebody who likes to let things percolate and think quite a bit, that's completely fine too. Take your card home with you. There's an online version available. So if you go to fcgov.com to park planning, there's a City Park Tomorrow link And there's an online version of that comment card. So if you've got neighbors or family you want to talk with, and have consensus, feel free to do that. In addition, there's an online survey at that same link that you can fill out and give us more feedback. We definitely want to hear from everybody, so thanks.
All right, we are going to open the floor for questions. We've got a couple of people here that will have microphones, and they will bring them to you. I'd ask that you give everybody a chance to answer or ask a question before you ask a second question. With that, who has the first question for us?
I'm a little concerned, Kurt, about the budget and the staging. And the reason is because I think some of the key elements that would be most desirable, which would be things like increasing the safety of the City Park Drive, making that a non-drive zone, and the improvements to the restroom area, those are forestalled, put into later phases that we don't necessarily know will get funded. And the cost is pretty high. And at the same time, moving the tennis courts is also delayed. So maybe it'll get funded, maybe it won't, but if it does, it's still a delay. So I went over to City Park today and I looked, and with a little reconfiguration, you could change where the train tracks go. You could actually fit in all of the tennis courts. You could make that safe zone, and you could reduce the size of the little train building, and you could probably get the whole thing with a very modest increase in your budget, which means you'd accomplish in phase one the really critical things and leave as possibilities some of the other things. So I hope you'll consider that, because this isn't so much a question as a suggestion. I thought that's what this was for. I really would like to see you reconsider that, and I really don't know if you're so committed it has to go in these 3 stages that that's not bargainable, but I do think a little creative thought could put the most important elements in place without a lot more funding at the present time, and then not leave in jeopardy the possibility that some of those things don't get funded later. So I hope that's useful to you.
It's very useful, yeah. Thank you for the comment. The phasing is something that we've looked at, and it's not set in stone. The train, again, is a priority for us, so that is a phase 1 item that we're committed to. And, it's tricky, frankly, to fit a train into a park that has over 600 trees in the core area alone. And so the alignment of that train track was very meticulously laid out to minimize or limit any kind of damage to tree roots. So we were very conscious about where that alignment was. That's not to say there couldn't be some tweaks. And in terms of phasing, I think looking at, I guess what I'm asking is if you have a preference for phasing, we'd love to hear that and put it on your comment card.
Is it on? I often use City Park to walk dogs, I'm a walker and a jogger, and most of the surfaces are concrete. Concrete is 10 times denser than asphalt. I'm getting older, and I think if you look at the audience, we're not all going to be on the playground. We're trying to use the area as a place to walk and slow jog and so on. And so I'm asking that the pathways, the sidewalks, be asphalt and not concrete, and that even the southern extension around the lake, that there is space. I've actually measured it myself. I've lived in the area 25 years. To include a gravel pathway or a clay pathway for those of us who walk and jog. The injuries, shin splints, stress fractures, plantar fasciitis, hip and knee injuries. We want to support our local orthopedists, but we need asphalt or clay or something, pathways.
I appreciate the comment. Definitely, we can look at crusher fine paths, certainly. So thank you.
I also don't have much of a question, more of a comment. I pretty much take my son every day to the park, and the things that I see getting used are college kids in the field, the sidewalks getting used by runners, the lake getting used by fishermen, and the parks. And the things that aren't used every day, the playgrounds, yes, sorry, the playgrounds. And the things that I see not used every day are the pool, the ball fields, and the trolleys, and the trains. And it seems like there's a lot of focus on those aspects right now, and not necessarily improving the things that are used every day. And you know, this park design is interesting, and it looks awesome, but all I see is wood that degrades in 10 years, a line of people up to the top, and not a lot of kids really getting into it. And when I look at playgrounds, I kind of see them, you know, kind of spread out, maybe like 2 or 3 throughout the park, or like a small one over here, small one over there. Something a little more conducive to like wear and tear and kids that are every day trying to get out of their house.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
After watching your wonderful program, I have come up with a few thoughts, suggestions, and let's start with a fun one. How about in a later phase, putting the bandstand back in the middle of the lake for concerts? That's where it was in the 20s and 30s. It was very simple. It was a small platform with a little board fence around the sides of it, and then a post on each corner so they could string little lights around it at night. I mean, it was really fun, and the band boys used to go out on a little skiff and or cruise, whatever little thing, that motorized boat that took them out to the bandstand, and people would come from all over and park on Firecracker Hill to listen to it, and people on Mulberry would sit out on their porches, because wasn't it Meredith Wilson that said that the most wonderful thing is the sound of music wafting over water? But it would be a great place for concerts at night, for people to sit along your new promenade and watch the band play. I guess it was kind of fun, because from time to time the wind would pick up and their music would blow into the lake or the lights would go out, but it still was a wonderful tradition that many people still remember. Number 2, Club Tico. Pretty soon that's going to be 100 years old. It is a landmark. You need to keep that in mind. However, it has been altered many, many times over the years, but one of your goals is to keep history, so you might just keep that in mind as you start remodeling the Club Tico. And finally, the new building, it's being referred to as the Pavilion, but actually I'd rather see it be referred to as the station or the train station, because the Pavilion was Club Tico from the 1920s to 1960s. That was known as the Pavilion in City Park, and it's too bad it wasn't built on a more grand scale like the one down in Denver's City Park.
Thank you, Carol. Appreciate that.
Hi, my name's Ken Axelson. I'm a 46-year resident of Fort Collins. And about 6, 7 years ago, I got involved with the game of pickleball. So I'm very focused about the phasing that you're showing in the park development, which I'm really impressed with what I'm seeing here, but I'm really concerned about the gap in there, because there's quite a sizable pickleball community who's here with me tonight. And we have a heck of a time finding a place to play in this town. There are empty tennis courts all over the place, but there are only 8 real pickleball courts, outdoor pickleball courts in Fort Collins. And you're talking about cutting that in half for a year plus between phase 1 and phase 2 before you move from the 4 courts that we have over on Oak Street to someplace over there by the City Park Golf Course, I guess is where that's going to go. Now, we're very receptive to having you suggest some other places, provide some other facilities, so we're less impacted by that loss of 50% of our outdoor court space here in town. There are some courts I know up by Jack Surplus, and I forgot the name of that park up there. Greenbrier, huh? Well, that's part of the 4. That's only half of them. So there's a Greenbrier that has some courts laid out, but there are no fixed nets up there. So maybe as a minimum interim, move the nets that are at City Park up there while you're destroying one and moving the others or something, at least so we don't lose that capacity. But also put some more plugs into the Parks and Rec Department that we need more space to play. You'll notice that we aren't the young kids that are out playing on the playgrounds either, but we want to keep moving as we get older, and this is a real good way to do that, and we have a good time doing it. So we want to make sure that continues.
Good. Thanks for coming out, pickleball players. I think you'll like what I have to say next. I hope you do. Great suggestion about moving the nets temporarily. That's something we can look at. Second is that should the offer for phase 2 be funded, even a portion of that offer, if it's funded, we may be able to roll that into a phase 1 project, and so there may not be a delay. We could have pickleball rolled in as it's more efficient for us to build a park as one rather than string it out and make it into multiple phases. So if the council chooses to fund all of phase 2 or a portion of phase 2, the way that we're presenting the offer to the city council is that it could be funded in subphases, and one of those subphases is the pickleball and tennis courts. So I would encourage you to go to the website and participate in the process of the budgeting, participate in the budgeting process. The second point I want to make is we have another offer in place for 4 courts at Spring Canyon Park. And because we recognize there's a need in the city. And we know that the Twin Silo Park courts are being used. And so we're trying to find homes for other places to play pickleball in Fort Collins. So there are 2 offers hanging out there right now within the budget that would provide additional pickleball courts in the city.
Hi. I was here Monday night, and so got to participate in the process. Thank you, and thank you for doing it several times. So one thing, just a comment I want to make. So pickleball is great, but I'm a tennis player, and we were already sad to see 1 tennis court go. We're down to 2, and going down to 0 in a super busy park where the tennis courts get used all the time, as well as the pickleball courts. That is one of the most used amenities in our park, and it's a shame that it would go away. And in my opinion, I'm worried that it wouldn't come back because, it's out of sight, out of mind. Oh, we got busy with this shiny object over here, so we're just not going to put the tennis courts in for a while. So very concerned about that. But the other thing is on Monday night, so you'll see after this process that there's going to be a little clicker session and people are asked to vote. And the first question that came up in the voting said, are you in support of this program? Just like it's on the form here. And as many of you here are expressing concerns now, and as a lot of people in the 2.5-hour meeting Monday night, there were more people here than this, believe it or not, for our neighborhood meeting. You answer that first question and you're afraid to say no because then you're afraid the project's going to go away or no parts of it are going to get implemented. So I feel that there needs to be some kind of clarification on that very first question. When you ask, are you in support of this program? I think a lot of people would say yes with contingencies as opposed to yes wholesale or no. And it's kind of a pigeonholed question, yes or no. There's no in-between answer for number one.
Okay, so my answer to that is that's what the comments section is for, is if you say, we did have a neighborhood meeting on Monday night, and we got a lot of that on the comments. So yes, but
Good.
this. That's what we want to hear from you. So I think if you're inclined to say yes, say yes. If you have some exceptions or some suggestions or whatever, please add those. That's the value in the comment card.
But I think what people are concerned about with that is that then the results get posted and they say 51% or 51 people said yes, and then 49 said no. So those 51% yeses were yes, but they were with qualifications, contingencies, whatever. So just a point. And I do have another question after, but I'm going to pass it on and I'll save it for after.
Okay.
I just wanted to second, I'm a tennis player as well as a pickleball player, and we're in the same team. There's no reason that every tennis court can't be striped for pickleball as well. It's same surface, it doesn't cost that much, and then if we have a tournament or something like that, you can play tennis, but if we have a pickleball tournament that weekend, the courts are reserved, they can take, they don't even have to take the tennis court nets down, put up nets and have pickleball. And so that'd be my suggestion, is I would never do another tennis court without making it also flexible to be used for pickleball. The other thing is, while you're contemplating this, there's a basketball court right next to the baseball fields. You could stripe that for pickleball, make all these people happy. Once again, a pickleball net is $160. All you got to do is stripe it. We can bring our own nets if we had to. We prefer permanent nets, but it can be done. So, in other words, we're not fighting each other. But there shouldn't be another tennis court ever built without having it striped, so it can be flexible and used for other purposes. I also like Carol's idea about a live music venue, being a musician. We need to have places other than the lagoon on CSU campus where we can play, have concerts and things of that nature. I would suggest maybe give some thought to increasing the use of the lake. Increase the fishing availability as far as stocking and those kind of things, if that's part of the plan, as well as maybe paddle boats and things of that nature where it can be used more often.
So I want to respond to your comment about pickleball. We have many courts in the city that are striped on tennis, and I don't have the exact number, but it's about a dozen, something like that. And I know that we've heard from many in the pickleball community that have said, we really want permanent courts and we want lighted permanent courts. And so I guess what I want to say is, if you're looking for striped courts on tennis, we've got plenty of them. Now, we don't have a set of 4, so I know there's been some requests for some of those sorts of things, but we do have that in the city. The other thing is that we've heard from tennis that there are issues related to tournaments and games and other things when pickleball is striped on tennis. So we have to, all I'm saying is there's a balance there. But I do want you to hear me when I say we're trying to find a way to get more pickleball in the city. And I also want the tennis players to know that our goal is to not convert tennis to pickleball. We're trying to find a way to add to our system, which is a challenge for us because we don't always have room for everything. But that's what we're working towards.
I have a question from Facebook. Kristen asked, if the council chooses not to fully or partially fund the later phases, where does the money come from, or do the later phases not happen?
So to answer that question, we always pursue other avenues. Grants is an option that we look at. We have had people step up and donate money to projects, so that's also another option. So what we'll do is we will explore the different options in front of us that include both of those, and we'll also seek feedback from the council about their interest in funding this, both in the short term and in the long term.
I've lived in the City Park neighborhood for 28 years, and walk our dog around the lake daily, like a lot of people in the neighborhood do. One thing that I think we need to think about is this is in a way a commons. It's the marquee park for the city of Fort Collins. It's the one space where everyone does come together. It's a public space. We have Old Town Square, that's a commercial space. It also has, you know, a public element to it, but this is our commons. This is where we come together. And those of us from the neighborhood who experience it and see how it has attracted not just the neighborhood, but the entire community. There are certainly events, July 4th, obviously, but you look at the pavilions. They get used, and we have celebrations there. People from all over the area, the community come there. If you look at all the open areas, what we have right now, they attract people. What I see in this design, my initial reaction is that we're losing a lot of that. This is not people-oriented. This is not pulling people together the way it is right now. You're going to have structures. You have a train and you have a trolley. Those run summer months, warm months. 9 months of the year, they're not running, and then we have structures to look at. I don't think it's appealing to look at a garage with a trolley in it. That's not appealing. We have to think in terms of what we're losing and not what this looks great, but it feels like an amusement park. This is a commons. There's some really good ideas, I think, in here, but the structures are too big. Their uses are for part of the year. And they're going to be there in place of what we have now that is more of a magnet for the community. I think that's so important, and that should be the focus. And when I look at what you have in terms of your goals, but this doesn't really address the goals in my mind. There's a whole feel to it that is very, very different. That core area is going to be full of structures. That playground is too much. That just doesn't make sense. It's just too much. It's not a draw. Go and spend time, day in, day out. Walk around, experience it. See what people are drawn to. See what we have first. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one, okay? And I think that in the process, I'm very concerned that this train has already left the station. I know you prefaced this meeting saying that this is not a done deal. Phase 1, though, is 2019. What is that, 6 months from now? I think this is a big issue right now, and I know people in the community are really beginning to focus on it. So let's think about it in terms of what we have and what we have to lose.
Thank you for that comment. Just a couple of things that I want to respond to. The first is the building, and we do see it as a multi-purpose pavilion. So we see it as being used somewhat as a shelter, and throughout the year, it's not just an empty building, as you indicate. The other thing is the goal is that those trolley and train would be on display. So there might be historic references that speak to the history of those structures. So we see that as an active building year-round, not just locked up and closed when the trolley and train are in operation. I'll just leave it at that.
All right, thank you. I've lived near City Park, directly near, for 30 years. My boys both grew up going to City Park in quite a few different phases. The old rocket metal crazy unsafe slide that used to be there and burn your tush on the summer heat. But my first impression is that the playground area, as Frank mentioned, is pretty limited from what I could see. And I also do like the idea of having a few smaller areas that are more dispersed. The structures, they're interesting, but I feel like perhaps that should be a later consideration. I've forgotten what phase that was in, but before that, and primarily for me as a woman near the park, our safety, lighting, security, what's going to happen. We know the transient community stays there a lot, year-round, and that does concern me. I won't go there at night, ever, but I think with lighting, with improved patrolling perhaps, which is a different department, that could feel safer. And one more part of that is just a comment. I also have been a longtime dancer at Club Tico since 1981, and I know there are people here who probably were dancing much earlier than that. I am very sad that the city has outpriced the Friends of Traditional Dance, so we can no longer rent that hall to hold our dances there. It was a big draw for many years, either working with the city to work on that funding so we are able to dance there still. The hall has such character. It's a wonderful dance floor. And the outside pavilion idea, perhaps having something that is more multi-use, both concert, performance of whatever kind, possibly even having a surface that is acceptable for outdoor dancing. It's a wonderful thing to be able to do. And I just hate to see all of the concentration, the urban density, I feel like is also losing some of the character of the park. Keep that historical quality as much as possible. Keep that open arboretum feeling. And I think a few of us would be a lot happier. So sorry, that was run on, but I had a lot of comments.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Hi there. As a longtime resident and growing up in Fort Collins, I think we've seen our open land turn to targets time and time again. And I think that preserving the open space of the park and that feel, as the gentleman behind me said, is going to be important for our future and for our children's future. We need to have open space in this city, and I think that is the key to this park. I'm also wondering how many trees are going to be removed in this process, how long the park will be closed for, and how it will be accessible for us during that time, and what we can expect in terms of increased traffic from the amusement type attractions that are being provided in this plan.
There was a lot of questions there. I'll see if I can answer most of them. So, first question is about the trees. Our intent is to keep every tree. There's a few that we are looking at potentially transplanting, and those are smaller trees. But we've worked really hard to lay this plan out so that none of the trees are impacted, because we know that's a treasure. And that's right at the top of the list in terms of our priorities, and it's informed every single line on this plan so far. In terms of, what was your second question? Related to, traffic and closure. So, we don't have it all figured out yet in terms of when the park's going to open or close, because it's not a done deal. We're still working on it, seeking feedback. As I've said all evening, the train is a priority for us, and the reason it's a priority is because it was a priority from the voters. So the voters said, we want a train, and here's the money for the train, and so that's our priority, is to build a train. So that is top on the list because we're responding to the voters. So that's why it's a phase one item. I think if you have other comments and suggestions about phasing, we want to hear from you. We did hear that at the neighborhood meeting. Those are valuable to us, something we can revisit. In terms of impacts, we don't know. I mean, I think a lot of the things that are here are already here today. There's already a playground. There's already a train. It's just closed. So things that we're introducing are gardens, and I don't know how much more traffic those will bring. but the other items aren't new to the park, they're just redone.
Yeah, I have like 7 questions, so I'll try to narrow it down to like 3, because they're all on different topics. But the main thing that I'm concerned about is, and I get this, the promenade where you're going to close the street off and make it a pedestrian mall. I get that. I'm in the park a lot. I'm there some weeks every day walking around, and I understand what he's talking about. This park gets used by a lot of people and a diverse group. I understand the pickleballers are all here, and that's good, yay, pickleballers. But there's a diverse group of people that use this. There's LARPers in the park on Sunday afternoons. I'm a member of the Pokemon Go community. We're all out there lots of times. There's families using that playground all the time. And my big concern is I get the reason why you want to make that a pedestrian mall. Because in the summertime, there are people going back and forth because the playground is across from the pool, and you do have to watch, and I am really mindful. And I see people trying to race down that street going too fast, way too fast, and it just freaks me out. So I see somebody behind me, and I go really slow because I know you're going to have geese, you're going to have kids, you're going to have people on bikes on that, and I really get the need for making that a pedestrian mall, walking through there. But that's part of the reason is because the playground is right across from the pool, and you guys are you're going to change that. So you're moving the playground way across, and it's no longer going to be directly across from the pool. So part of the reason for making that a pedestrian mall and closing that section of road off, you're negating that by moving the playground so it's no longer across from the pool. So you're kind of, I don't know, doing 2 different things and defeating your purpose. But so my question is, when you block off that road and you're talking about increasing the parking on Bryant and making it better, but by doing so, you are blocking the total east-west access through the park. So if you're trying to park there and you can't find a place, how are you going to reroute? Are you going to have to go all the way to Mulberry and all the way back up to Mountain and back all the way around? I mean, if you have to find a parking place, I've been there sometimes when it's really busy. I mean, how is the traffic going to flow? I really haven't had a chance to look at that, so that's one question. My second question is about the playground, because I am there year-round, and that playground gets used. They say it's hot in the summer, but that sand is nice on a warm winter or fall day when the sun is out and the kids are out there playing on a weekend, and it's out there because it's nice because there is no trees and the sun is out and they can be out there playing when it's a little bit chilly still. My concern is on these plans, it looks like the playground is a lot smaller than what it is now, and the big pull to this playground now is that you've got the different age groups. You've got the playground for little kids and you've got things for the bigger kids, and I'm not really sure, you mentioned a top playground, but I would like to know the square footage now and then for the whole playground and for the different age groups, and I'd like to see a comparison of that. And if you guys have those numbers, that would be great.
Yes, thanks for the question. We actually had a similar question by one of the neighbors on Monday, and so I did actually go back and kind of look at square footages of community parks around town, and they're highly variable. They vary anywhere from 13,000 square feet to 16,000 is the typical community park playground size. City Park is the largest out of any of them. We have almost 30,000 square feet. So it is being, on these plans, it's quite a bit smaller, and so I think we are recognizing we need to look at ways to enlarge the space. It was a good comment Monday, and it's a good comment tonight as well. And it's definitely something we need to look into, so appreciate it. One of the things I did want to mention too is that similar to Twin Silo, there is a lot of vertical levels of play in this playground, so it's not quite fair to compare the square footage on the ground to other playgrounds where you only get kids 3 or 4 feet off the ground. I mean, we have levels of play at 10 feet, at 20 feet, you know, so there is some difference there, but definitely the footprint does need to grow. We recognize that.
Hello? Take just a few more questions, and then I'd like to get to our live polling.
Yeah, I actually don't have a question. I just want to add a couple more comments. And first, I just want to say I appreciate the forum, and I'm glad the city is here listening to everybody, all the users. and we all have our own vested interest. Unlike Ken, I've only been playing pickleball for about a year. And I just want to give you some observations from a new player, just to make sure that it's fresh in your minds, and we will have the community give feedback. But first off, pickleball is a sport and an activity. So there are people that play competitively, and then you've got mom and dad and grandma and grandpa out there with their grandkids. So it covers a larger group of people than just, oh, there's a few players out there. It is a community. I think there's probably a couple hundred people in Fort Collins that play. I love the fact that you added twin silo. It's awesome. However, if you're not a player, here's an observation. There's no shade. There's no windbreak. The courts are very close to each other. It's great and we love it, but perhaps the next time you're putting courts in, you want to get some feedback from the actual players or the people who engage in the activity, which could make it for very little cost, maybe a little bit better for everyone. And the other thing I'm not sure if you're aware of, City of Fort Collins is running lessons every month through the senior center. It's full and there's a wait list. So we're adding at least 12 to 15 players a month, every month, for the last couple of years, and I don't see that stopping going forward. And so having 8 courts in a city is great, but the reality is we've already outgrown that. So I would like you to just consider the fact, especially if you're going to put in more courts, what the cost might be to double that or triple that, just because there's so many people wanting to get on and we pay to play, so you're going to make revenue on that. So I just wanted to just have that out there for you to think about.
Yeah, appreciate the comment. We did receive feedback from pickleball players on the design of Twin Silo Park, just so you're aware. And I'm not saying it couldn't be better, but we do that sort of outreach, and we will again for these sorts of things. All right, how about one more question?
I have it. It isn't a question, it's just a comment. And it isn't so much a comment to you, to the city, as it is to the people that are here listening. And I'm speaking as a 45-year educator. People are beginning to worry, educators are beginning to worry about kids that are not experiencing what we experienced as kids. You know, being able to pick up a stick and whap it on the ground, move a couple of rocks around, things like that. More and more, the kids are being constricted, restricted by what they are legally able to do or able to play on or able to play with. And I am looking, it's one of those alert things. Amber alert. That's very apropos, worrying about kids. There's a really wonderful book called The Last Child in the Woods, and people are beginning to design playgrounds that address the fact that kids are not allowed to pick up sticks and whap another log with a stick. And as I look at this playground that you've designed, you have a number of those positive aspects in it. And I know I probably sound like a real weirdo. I love that little onion thing. I think most kids would really dig one of those. You don't have to have 3, but having just one would probably be an enormous draw for a lot of kids. And the other things that you have too are great. Don't ditch those. I mean, yeah, we still need those, you know, boring swing sets. There doesn't seem to be improvement on swing sets. But, you know, teeter-totters have gone, lots of things have gone. But crawling through things, being able to pick things up, move things around, you guys, kids need it. And our kids need so much that they're not getting, and less of what they are getting. Okay.
Great, thank you. I've got this up already, I'm sorry. Yes, so the train would wrap, in the first phase, would wrap around the existing restroom, and then what we'd have is we'd have an ADA crossing accessible route across the tracks to access the restroom. We're exploring maybe potentially even leaving it there long-term. It's something we're still looking at. But the reason for that is because the cost of the restroom exceeds the budget that we have now. So we can still make the project work with the restroom in the middle of the train tracks. Oh, there'll be crossings there. We'll have crossings just like you would have at a train track. So make it a safe crossing. We'll have fencing around it, keep it safe, those sorts of things. Okay, so let's begin with the live polling. We have a series of questions seeking your feedback. Okay, if you need a clicker, white clicker, raise your hand, please. Raise your hand and ask that everybody get one. Oh, what happened? Everybody have one. Okay. So this is an overall view of the park, and the first question is the basic question, which is, do you support the overall vision for City Park? Again, as someone mentioned earlier, if you are inclined to say yes, we'd ask that you vote yes. If you're inclined to say no, say no. If you're in the middle somewhere but leaning one way or the other, that's what the comment card is for. Yes. So A is for yes and B is for no.
Everybody voted? Anybody still need time to vote? Okay. Oh, no, there's still a few more. All right. Y'all good?
Okay, let's go to the next question. Oh, so the next set of questions are specific to particular elements in the park. We're just looking for your feedback on some of the particular elements. The first element is the trolley garden, which is pictured here. And so this isn't specific to the pavilion, it's just kind of the garden concept. A for support, B for neutral, C for not supportive.
One more person who hasn't voted. There we go.
All right, we'll move on. This question is specific to the pavilion. And so we are asking for your comment about the building, but also just about the concept. Do you like the concept of having the train and the trolley in the same building, acting as a depot, acting as a shared structure, and those sorts of things? So support, neutral, or not supportive.
Last chance, last two people? Okay. Here we go.
Okay, next question relates to the promenade. The promenade is the closing that section of City Park Drive right in the middle of the park. And again, do you support the concept? Are you neutral or are you not supportive? Okay, this has to do with the boardwalk. Again, this is about improving the north shore of Sheldon Lake, creating a more accessible edge, access, etc. Support, neutral, or not supportive? Okay, this is the tickle. The tickle. This is the tickle. the tennis and pickleball courts. Tennis and pickleball. We're showing 2 tennis and 4 pickleball. It's just what's out there today. We're asking for, do you support this concept, understanding that it is not in the first phase? And I understand there's a preference for that, but that is, we're asking more just for your support of the overall concept of moving it here, putting it in this configuration in this location.
There's still 5 people who haven't voted. Last chance. Okay.
Okay, so this is the area that is where the existing train is today, and our drawing shows a putt-putt course here, but we're not set on that idea. We're seeking feedback. So we have 4 options for you to consider. If you have other ideas, please put those down in your comment card. A is putt-putt golf. This would be run through the city, through our recreation department. B is a smaller informal picnic area. C is a slacklining or hammock area. We envision putting up posts where you can hang hammocks and slack lines, which is growing in popularity. And D is unprogrammed passive use. What was the question? For purposes of this, the D is just sort of taking the train tracks out and leaving it as it is. Oh, you can have a picnic there. It just wouldn't have shelters and things like that. We're thinking, so B is maybe some smaller single-use picnic shelter or something like that. But you could certainly throw a blanket down and have a picnic. B would be just maybe some small shelters, you know, like one table or picnic tables, or maybe even no shelters, but just some picnic tables. Whereas D would be just grass, trees. Something like that. Well, I'm going to stay focused on this right now. Okay.
Got all the votes in?
Okay, so part of the way that we have proposed phase 2 in the budget is in, this is all of phase 2, and I understand from your comments some of you would like to see some of the other elements in phase 2. Again, please write that in on your comment card. Right now, these are the parts of phase 2, and we're asking for your prioritization of these, which will help us understand how we might prioritize these. So, A is for tennis, pickleball courts, and parking as your highest priority. B is the pavilion trolley tracks as your highest priority. C is the playground and picnic shelters as your highest priority. And D is for the restroom as your highest priority. Great. Well, that concludes our presentation. Again, thank you for your feedback. Before you leave, please take a moment to fill out the comment card. City staff will be available to answer any questions that you might have. Why don't you leave the